Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'd like to introduce your host, Jason Langer, Technical Evangelist at Pure Storage.
Thanks, Roman, and hi, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. I'm very excited to be your host this afternoon. First, we'll spend some time discussing cyber resiliency, and then we'll get into our very special guest today, Diana Nyad. But before we kick off, we need to cover a few housekeeping items. First, all guests will be muted during this event, so if you experience any system issues, please send a note using the chat window at the bottom of the screen so we can address that right away. Please keep in mind, we're live streaming today, so if something does go wrong, we appreciate your patience and we'll correct things in real time. Also, let's get social. We want to see how much fun you're having. So tag us on your social media posts with hashtag #EngageWithPure, whether that be LinkedIn, Twitter, TikTok, whatever your social media platform of choice is. And we also invite you to engage with our guests today via the live chat box on your screen. And finally, we just want to thank all of our attendees for your continued support of Pure Storage and making time for us in your schedule today. And with that, let's get started. So in our rapidly evolving digital landscape, cybersecurity is no longer just the domain of a backup administrator. It has become a shared responsibility across the entire organization, requiring a collaborative and streamlined approach to ensure comprehensive protection. And this is coming from an ex-backup administrator. To help us dive into the critical themes of modern data protection and cyber resiliency, I'd like to introduce my good buddy, Jason Walker, as what I refer to him as J-Dub. As the global practice leader here for cyber resiliency at Pure Storage, he helps guide organizations just like yours every day on the security initiatives and simplifying the implementations and their protection measures. So welcome, Jason, and thank you for joining us today.
Welcome. I'm glad to be here. I love talking about the doom and gloom of cybersecurity and preparation for that. But it's a very important topic, and I'm always happy to talk about it, Jason.
Yeah, and anytime I can spend time with you is a bonus in my book, Jason. So let's dive into it.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to start hitting you with a lightning round of questions. So let's talk about question one. So when preparing for a cybersecurity readiness strategy and plan, what should companies take as the top 3 steps? If they get hacked, or what departments should be engaged or notified first?
Well, yeah. Well, the first thing, when you talk about, you definitely have to have a plan. And it's not just a plan like we talked about 100 years ago when, you got call Dave, we need something restored, tell them to get the tapes out of the trunk, load them up, and let's get going. There should be a plan, and it should be a well thought out plan involving a lot of different departments. So, what departments should be engaged in that? Well, first of all, you got to let your boss know, whoever that is. And you should determine that in that plan as well. If it's legal, the CEO, someone should be notified to be to be aware of all of that in there. And, part of that plan should definitely have tabletop sessions with these executives so that everybody knows their role. We had a customer, Jason, that got attacked, and they hadn't even identified the person that was authorized to take them offline. Now they're being attacked. So you got to get offline.
Yeah,
you got to set it, but nobody. And finally, some smart admin like yourself at one time just walked over and unplugged it. It's like, someone can fire me, whatever, but we got to do it. So identify that in the plan, and you should definitely get yourself offline. Notify whoever the located boss is, whether that's a CEO or legal or both, and definitely plan on then you can begin your recovery part of your plan in there. But that's definitely the beginning there.
Yeah, you hit on something that I used to do. Again, I did start my career as a backup admin, is like doing those test restores and stuff like that, right? Like doing that tabletop exercise of like, okay, cyber attacks are just a new threat and a new attack that you need to actually practice and be prepared for. It's not something you want to just fly by the seat of your pants and be like, yeah, we've got it, we're good. So
right. It's a team. You don't play foot. If you're a pro football team, you don't go out there without practice because you'll look disorganized. You won't be effective, and you won't accomplish your ultimate goals in there. And it's the same way with these sessions as well. You want to be able to clearly identify who's doing what in the role, and that team concept in there. Like we said, it's not just one guy's job anymore. It's across the board. And to respond effectively to any kind of attack, you need that team.
Yeah, and just since we're going out global, that means American football as well as football to the rest of the world.
That's right, exactly.
Just want to call that out.
Absolutely.
So speaking of that, kind of taking that team methodology or that idea, what can teams do to increase their security posture and be more effective in evaluating their actual readiness? AK, we'll keep the sports analogy. What can they do to be ready on game day? You talked about practice, but what else?
That's right. So, yes, be ready on game day. Well, I mean, we can go back to a different kind of plan, and it's a plan of how to protect it, how to have your data ready to be protected and available. And again, it's got to be a well laid out plan. It's important right now to have two areas. It's visibility and resilience or control. You want to be able to do that, decrease the surface area of attack, and adapt, respond, and recover quickly. So, get visibility. You want to identify what data is the most important in your environment and how should that be protected. Your video collection, Jason, is a low priority. I'm sorry. I went to the wall for you, but ultimately, it's not as important. But we do have data that is critical to business. So that should be identified as such, and there should be a protection plan to build tiers of resilience in it, to control in there. If you just have your data and then you're doing a traditional backup and you have this 24-hour window between protection, you're set up to lose a lot of data that way, and you'll lose a lot of productivity. So setting up visibility to understand what data is important and how it should be protected is in there. And then concert with that is control over that data or resilience. If you only have your data in one place, guess what? You have no control, Jason.
Yeah.
Somebody comes in and wipes that out. Where's your data now?
Yeah.
Nowhere. So you want to build resilience in. You want to build a second copy. You want to set things up. Maybe if the data is important enough, if you're visible to that, maybe the top data needs to have zero recovery point objective. You need to set up something that is automatic so that you have no loss of time. And then you can scale that down and something that's maybe near zero RPO or something that is fine doing a traditional backup. We can go 24 hours without that data. You want to be able to get control though and have separate parts. If you have your data in one place, even if you're protecting it there, if you have an attack and all of a sudden you have cyber insurance companies that say, "Oh, don't touch that array. We got to do some investigation in there."
Yeah.
Maybe there's federal. Maybe it's a federal kind of a nation state hacker trying to get at your data. Well, the feds might say, "Whoa, we gotta do some forensics on that. Take a look." Having a second copy, having a replicated copy, could give you something to work off of and recover and get your business back up and running while the authorities do what they have to do there. So building that control in there is critical, and reducing the amount of products you have in your environment in there is very critical. You want to reduce the surface area of the attack. Jason, if you had to protect the state of Texas by yourself, that's a lot of ground to cover. But you'd prefer Rhode Island to be able to do it. You want to reduce the surface area of an attack in there. Less logins, less everything that you add into your environment is an area of possible entry and attack. So you want to reduce the surface area of that. And then all these things, building resilience and reducing the surface area, that raises the cost of the attack to the attacker. If I go to a house and it's the doors are wide open and nobody's home, well, that's a pretty easy attack vector. But if I pull up and it's barbed wire, electric fence, a couple of Dobermans behind there, I'm probably moving to the next house, Jason. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's their time. I hate to say it, but they're going to look to save their time. So the least protected scenario is going to be the one they're going after. So
that's right.
That's a weird way of saying it, but I get what you're going at, right? Like you want to be more protected. Sure. Just the idea of the deterrent might be enough as opposed to the actual recovery of the data.
Absolutely.
So these things sorry, Jason.
Yeah. No, that's fine. I was going to say all this is built up to have to recover quickly.
Yeah.
In there. So make sure you can recover quickly. I can put you in a panic room, Jason, but if you can't get out, were you really saved?
Right.
I don't think so.
Here lies
get you out of there.
Here lies Jason from starvation because he was in his panic room. But so one thing that I know personally from my career and all the things you talked about, 3-2-1 rule, different software, different products. But one thing that always seemed to come up was budget or money. Those were always programs that always seemed like disaster recovery sites always seemed to struggle on the bottom line when it comes to budget. So when you're
Yeah.
you're talking about having tiered approach for your intellectual property and protecting your data, how do you approach beyond the admins and the folks that have to implement and maintain this, but the VPs or the directors or the execs to be like, hey, we need cap space, right? We need to go out
Yeah.
and get these
Great.
great free agents to help build our
Yeah.
team. How do you address that with folks?
Well, all right. This is what I like to say. Picture yourself, Jason Langer, lottery winner. You've got a ton of money, but you want to give a lot of it away. And all of a sudden, people are coming up to you, and let's say you're wanting to spend money here, there, and everywhere. It can be very easy for things to get out of control. And so, what you want to do is simplify it. So, picture the board at a company having to do the same thing. They have the funds, but especially in the area of cybersecurity, you can go a million different directions in there. The first thing you want to do is simplify. I talked about buckets of visibility and resiliency slash control. Reducing the attack plane. Put your projects into logical buckets that can easily be followed and tracked and ongoing, and also can track results after an attack. Jason, one thing I like to point out is this attack era that we're in, this cybersecurity era. It's not just a matter of when, but if, or not if, but when. Sorry, the other way
Yeah.
around. But not only that, but it's not like the chicken pox where you just get attacked once and you itch a lot. It was really uncomfortable, but it never happens again. The reality is it's happening all the time in there. So you want to have these buckets and then check your results on there. Do we need more adapt, respond, and recover type? Do we need more visibility? Do we need more control? And that way, when you do that, if you can ground your board into those buckets, now the board understands where you're coming from with funds. Now you see the results, and it's easier to get money out of it. Otherwise, you come haphazardly in all different directions. The board's more likely to go, hold on, hold everything, and then they're going to force you into a plan like that, and that costs time, and that's more attack, and that's more downtime for you. So do it early, simplify it, tether the board to that kind of simplified plan, and then follow up and update as you go along. It'll be easier if you keep it simple.
Yeah, keep it concise, presentable, right? Because these are folks that probably aren't going to understand all the different terms and technology, right? They just need to know
Right.
that you've got a plan to protect, grandma's chocolate chip cookie recipe, right?
Right.
So nobody
Yeah.
else can get it. And I think tying back to your first comment about doing a tabletop exercise,
Yeah.
that would help identify these things because then you know, like, oh, wow, we didn't think about that. So that's something else that we need to probably plan for and potentially, depending on the situation, actually budget for, right? So having kind of a prepared, running through an exercise and knowing what you have and what you don't have, and
Absolutely.
also the pros and cons of that is probably going to help you have that conversation as you go up the ladder. It's going to be less about technology and really more about just the outcomes. Is that safe to say?
I think that's what you want it. You want it to be. You want to tie it to actual outcomes and then address things moving forward. Well, we had a bucket for respond and recover, but last time we went through an attack, we really fell down there. We need more budget for that area. So what can I expect out of that? Well, we anticipate if we do this project, we'll increase our recovery efficiency by 50%. And then after an attack, you can take a look back at that. And so it was 60%. So I think we're really solid on there for the next one. Let's focus on reducing the attack plane and areas of attack. We can do more around that because we feel good about this bucket. And that's what you want to do to help keep things on track and keep things accountable and make sure that you're improving. Otherwise, you're like, I think we're doing well. We spent
Right.
X amount of dollars. Spending is the worst correlated impact there. It can be very spurious.
Yeah, going back to our sports analogy,
Yeah.
just because you bought all the very expensive free agents doesn't mean you
That's
have a
right.
good team, right? Like, I'm going to keep that one going for you, Jason. So,
That's right. No, that's right. You're right. I mean, so you could be a GM with all kinds of money and bring in a bunch of free agents, but they all do one thing really well. Maybe they're all wide receivers. Well, we have no one to throw them the football.
Yeah.
Just kind of keeping it going. You got to make sure that things stay balanced and that you can review these after each attack.
Yeah, and that actually flows nicely. And kind of the next question is, what mistakes do you see teams making? Right. So we use the analogy of going out and
Right.
overpaying or whatever, but like in the real world, like what do you see that teams struggle with, or what mistakes have you seen
Yeah.
repeated where it's like, oh man, I wish they didn't do that?
Yeah. Well, so when you realize that you need to do something around it, and you're like, okay, we're going to buy into the framework, let's say the NIST framework, right? We're going to buy into that. Then you go and start looking for products that can help you. And guess what? There's hundreds of thousands of them out there. It's kind of like when I go shopping on Amazon. Sometimes I was just looking for a chair,
Yeah,
and you get for your analysis paralysis, and you just put a freeze on. You say, look, I'll address it later, and later becomes 2 weeks. And same thing happens in the business world. You can really get overwhelmed by things. So simplify. But also another big mistake is you go too far down one path and you spend all this money getting really excited about this solution, but you don't realize it only covers 10% of what you
sure.
ultimately needed in there. So if you don't have those main points and you don't ground your board to those points where they're bought in, now they can be influenced to really spend a lot of money in a bucket, and suddenly you're fighting a political and a financial battle because they're convinced that what they heard over here, I heard the buzzwords. I
Yeah.
like those buzzwords. So they get enamored with a free agent and they spend all their cap space on that. And you're left with a really unbalanced attack, when an unbalanced security model around that. It's not good.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess I'm also assuming the worst mistake is people just don't think it's going to happen to them. I can't imagine people think that way with how much it's
That
reported in
is
the news and everything,
right.
but I'm sure people are like, ah, it's not going to happen to me or
There's
us, you
still,
know?
I think some people still go with the cross your fingers approach.
Yeah,
Well, let's hope
yeah,
that, because we're going to budget it for next year. Well, you could really, the cost of downtime goes up monthly,
right.
and I hope it doesn't happen. And we certainly don't like selling doom and gloom and talking about that. But the reality is, there's an attack every 14 seconds out there, and so you're really spinning the wheel and hoping you don't hit bankrupt.
Yeah, it's one of those things
A
where
wheel of fortune, a team sport? Maybe not, but
maybe, I don't know.
let's spin the wheel, land on bankrupt.
It's one of those things where yeah, you think you can kick the can down the road, but it's like insurance. It's best served not to do that, because when it does happen to you, you're definitely going to wish that you had it. So, um well, let's go on to the next question. How
Okay.
do you mitigate risks when third parties are involved, right? So
Oh,
hopefully you have a concise team within your organization that you're able to move these
yeah.
things around. But what happens when, third parties get involved, and what kind of dynamics can that bring to it?
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes when you're going through a plan, you realize you're going to need some outside expertise in there, or a partner. You have a partner involved in there. I actually like the idea of having a regular partner and then rotating in maybe an analysis team to kind of give you some checks and balances on that. But I would treat that partner or that third party just like I would an internal risk. I don't think it's any different than having your own employees go there. They should be very stringent against there. And then how do those vendors score against my bucket points? So I have outcomes that are tied to these buckets. How do those vendors or partners, how do they score against those main bucket points? Like what's their plan on that in there? So I would treat them as like internal employees, and really vet them as you would. Say, well, they're so and so. They're a big company. I'm sure they've done their due diligence. Don't assume. Do
Yeah.
your own checks and put them through that, and then score them along the lines of your bucket results.
Yeah, and I guess that also goes along, like, if you're addressing, if you've got, temporary workers or maybe some
Yeah,
contractors or suppliers, right? Like you have to broaden that security bubble, for lack of a better word, of like it goes outside of your four walls, right? Like these people you
yeah,
engage with your business potentially could be a threat vector as well.
right.
So you need
Yeah,
to be looking at them and making sure you've got the same kind of policies and security measures in
right.
place.
Yeah, and I get asked a lot about how important is education in general on that. I think we all understand what phishing is. If we're in an organization, but maybe not. And you can really, that's one of those areas you could really go too far down the road on, because there's becomes a law of diminishing return on education. You do want to bring people aware. You want people to be aware of what's going on, talking about just folks in the org in there, but there's always going to be people along the bell curve who do the wrong thing. All it takes is one shot to get past the goalie. Huh?
Yeah.
See what
Oh, hey, hey.
or yeah, football in there, but all it takes is one shot. So as much as you do with education and awareness, that's great, and you should do it, and you should include the third parties and any contractors involved in that. You should absolutely vet them just as much as you would an employee, but also realize that that's just one part of it, and that if a shot does get past the goalie, now you're on the clock with your recovery plan
Sure.
on there.
Well, Jason, I want to thank you for your time again. Like I started off, I always enjoy our conversations. I'm glad I get to work with you day in and day out. But for the rest of the folks, as we wrap up, what would be like the parting gift that you'd like to give everybody, to summarize what we covered, or like what's the one or maybe two takeaways you want to leave everybody with?
I think you've heard me say the word simplify in there. Get good delineation on where you're planning. And then treat it, know that it's going to be a cycle, and tighten your cycle every time. If you have a goal, it's to tighten your event cycle every time. And of course, everyone can help, and you should ask them to help. But simplify, tighten your cycles, and do the due diligence to get everybody on board. Bring the team together. Even take a team picture, Jason. Take a team picture.
Who doesn't love a team picture?
But more importantly, be ready, and that way you'll feel confident as you go through the recurring cycles of attack.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jason. I really, again, appreciate the time. And now it's time to introduce our very special guest and somebody I'm extremely excited to spend some time with and speak to, Diana Nyad. A little bit about Diana. On September 2nd, 2013, Diana Nyad demonstrated to the world the power of the human spirit when she reached the shores of Key West, Florida, after swimming for 52 hours, 54 minutes, and 18 seconds, and nearly 111 miles. On that day, at 64 years of age, she became the first person to swim from Cuba to Florida without the use of a shark cage. Her 30-year career as a sports journalist has made her a compelling storyteller, and her life story has now come to the screen as a major motion picture, Nyad, starring Academy Award-nominated actors Annette Bening and Jodie Foster. Now, let's learn a little bit more about Diana's inspirational journey.
Americans are talking about 64-year-old Diana Nyad.
Swimming more than 100 miles, Cuba to Key West.
First ever to do it. 53 hours, her dream finally come true after 5 tries.
I've met a lot of extraordinary people, and she is one of the ones that has inspired me the most.
Diana Nyad.
Diana Nyad.
Diana Nyad.
The part of Diana that people can't seem to understand is, why would somebody get that close to death? What drives you to get that close to death? And I think that's really where Diana felt alive.
A new film called Nyad. It is based, of course, on the true story of marathon swimmer Diana Nyad.
The story is about the power of the human spirit. What is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?
Welcome, Diana. Thank you so much for joining us today. And like I said, I'm super excited to spend the next 30 minutes with you today.
Jason, it's my pleasure. I wish I were with you in person and with the whole Pure Storage group. I wish I could meet everybody, but I want to thank you, first of all, for mentioning the 18 seconds, because anybody can swim 52 hours, 54 minutes. It's that last 18 seconds to go that'll kill you every time. So,
yeah, and it's that final little bit of distance and time.
It is.
And I have to say, that made me tired just reading the amount of time. So I can't imagine, which we'll get into, what that experience was like for you and your team to accomplish that goal. But let's talk about the goal. Like, what made you decide to become the first human to swim from Cuba to the U.S.?
Well, that's it's sort of a two-part answer on that, Jason. And one is that I, in my 20s, which were the 1970s, was one of the best open water swimmers in the world. I held many world records around Manhattan, faster than any man or woman, across Lake Ontario, and we could go on. It's a blue planet. And our group of open water swimmers then and today swim, all over the world every day, courageous swims. And the Cuba swim since 1950 had been tried by the best of the best of all the open water swimmers. There is so much Mother Nature on steroids out there, which we can get into details today or not. But I'm telling you, from the Gulf Stream current to the particular sharks to the deadly jellyfish to unpredictable winds from different corners of the globe that affected over there, the best had tried since 1950, and they started, swimmers, calling it the Mount Everest of the world's swim. So there was a little ego in it for me. Oh, well, if it's the Mount Everest, I want to climb it. But it really goes back farther. It's really a lifelong dream. I grew up in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and was at the age of 9. I was a little champion pool swimmer age group, and at the age of 9, the Cuban Revolution broke out. And literally in 24 hours, thousands of Cubans flooded into my hometown. We knew Havana. My parents had danced at the Hotel Nacional, but all of a sudden, that forbidden island right off our shore became a mecca of sorts. It became a kind of a thing of mystique. And at 9, I was standing on the Fort Lauderdale beach with my mom. And I said, Mom, Cuba's out there. I can't see it though. Where is it? And she pointed this way. She said, it's just across the horizon, just across the dip. As a matter of fact, it's so close that you little champion swimmer, you could almost swim there. That's how close it is. And I went, what? Yeah. Swim there? And I'm telling you, Jason, from the age of 9, those words were kind of tickling around in the back of my imagination.
Yeah, and I nowadays I kind of forget about, but the time frame you're talking about, Americans couldn't go to Cuba, so it's kind of a little bit of the forbidden land, right? Like you couldn't start from there until after some things changed. So just the idea, I'm guessing of
not really, nothing changed. Today, you can't just hop on a plane and go to Cuba. Oh. You cannot. I even with my history there, I have to go through the State Department. I have to go through the Cuban interest section. It's never changed since all those years ago, 1959. We are not allowed to travel openly to Cuba, and certainly no Cubans are allowed to travel openly to anywhere in the world. So it is still a forbidden land of mystique right off our shore. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, yeah. And you touched on something just for myself and maybe some other folks. Can you just, when you say an open water swimmer, can you give us what's the quick definition of that?
You're swimming in the open sea. So you're not in a river. Yeah, there are tough river swims. There's a man who has swum, the entire length of the Ganges. There are people who have swum, swims in the Hudson River, et cetera, as I did, Manhattan Island. But those are protected by shores. They're easy to calculate the tides up and down. So when you're an open water swimmer, you're out away from shore. You might swim along the shore, but not within any protection. So open water just means that you're embracing the blue jewel of a planet as you go.
So I hear more challenging, a lot more variables to account for. Yeah. Maybe not as easy to plan for. It sounds like, and obviously just harder, right? Like I don't want to take anything away from that. Yeah. So when I hear the distance, and I was actually just watching a show the other day, and it showed Key West, and there was a sign that said Cuba's 90 miles that way, right? I can't imagine during that swim, there had to have been times that you were just like, I just can't do this. I want to give up. I want to get back in the boat. Everybody seems to be more comfortable in the boat compared to me in the water. Yeah. How do you mentally stay the course and, no pun intended on course, but stay focused on getting, from point A to point B?
Yeah, just a quick factual thing, and that is when you see that Key West buoy, so that's the southernmost point of the United States. Yeah. It does say 90 miles to Havana, right? Like that. But that many, many decades ago was done by ship people. And in the shipping industry, they measure nautical miles. So it is 90 nautical miles, but it's over 100. And depending on where you land, they take the GPS coordinates from where you started in Havana, where you finished in Key West. I wasn't a direct route. I'm going all over the place with currents, but I finally, from point to point, my swim was 110.8 miles.
Yeah.
But every day, that distance from no matter where you start and end from Havana to Key West is over 100 miles. It's not 90, it's 90 nautical miles.
They should frame that on the sign.
Oh, believe me, I've had meetings with the mayors and the county officials. Believe me, they're sick of me making that point. But so far, I have not had the power to change it. But to answer your deeper question, I think when you start anything, let's take the astronauts. Here we have, two astronauts, Bunny Williams and Butch, her compatriot, who are up in space. They were supposed to go for, what was it, 8 days? And they've been there for months, and they don't know when they're coming home. So are they up there afraid? No, they trust the science that NASA, all the people in the space industry have provided. They believe they will make it home on the next possible craft that is allowed to get home. So when I'm out there, I have set my mind. When I decide to do this thing, it's as if I've taken, Jason, a cap made out of titanium, and I put it over my head, and I've said, I don't care what happens. I don't care how tough the training is. I don't care how bad the weather is. I don't care if I'm stung by jellyfish and the pain is extraordinary. Nothing can deter me. I don't care if the people look comfortable with a blanket around them on the boat. I want to be here. I want to be doing what I set out to do, and my mind is focused on. So it's not a problem. I'm never at a point of, I want to quit. I'm not going to quit. Once I start, the entire enterprise, and by the way, it took 35 years, to actually, I did the first one to try at 28, finished it at age 64. That's right. and nothing in that time of those attempts and those failures made me feel like, it's too much for me. I bit off more than I can chew. I want to try something else. I was in it.
Yeah. And that kind of goes a little bit into the next question, but you did mention something. I don't like, personally, I don't like using the words failure. So you had 5 unsuccessful attempts prior.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, it's just a mindset thing, which leads into my question, like, how do you define mental toughness? Because you talk about all these things, and it's like, and you talk about the astronauts, and, I had this image of you putting on like a tinfoil hat, like,
yeah.
Stay away from the conspiracy theories. But when you hear mental toughness, like when people say, like, how are you mentally tough? What do you do? Like, what's your thought process? Like, I think I read sometimes you're singing songs in your head or you're counting. Like, what are kind of the tricks to help build that mental strength to go push through those kinds of things?
Yeah. I think it comes from, that word resilience. And like all of us, it's part of human nature. We can't find a person who's age 90 who says, you know what? The whole thing, it was just a bowl of cherries. I never had a problem. We all suffer. We suffer heartache. We suffer tragedy sometimes. And it's those who get up again. It's those who get knocked down and get up again and try again and come back. Yeah, as every expedition, the tough outdoor expeditions up the big mountains, across Antarctica, across the Sahara Desert, if they don't make it to what they want to make it to, they come back and they have new science, new intel, new ways to tap the human spirit, and they get back out there. So the 4 times that I didn't make it, and we can call them failures. I mean, the Greeks, the ancient Greeks, always said that isn't life about the journey, not the destination? Yeah. Yes, our team, and we got to get to team, because that's probably the most important facet of this whole expedition. But the idea is that every time we didn't make it, every time we failed or were unsuccessful, we were so proud of the journey. We had so much discovery. We showed our true grit. We came back and were intelligently plotting how to get around that problem that we had out there last time. And many people, after each of the 4 times I didn't make it, from around the world, mostly people I don't know and will never meet, sent me the Teddy Roosevelt speech speech, which was called The Arena. And I don't know if you remember it, Jason, but I'm going to grossly paraphrase it here. But Teddy Roosevelt said, you go ahead. You be the critic. You sit in your comfortable leather armchair while this guy gets in the ring and he gets bloodied and he gets dirtied and he's hurt and he falls to the canvas, but he gets back up and he's ready for more until he passes out. He will not stay on the canvas. So my team felt very proud that they were in the grandest adventure of their lives, that they were seeking history. Nobody had ever done this, and they were going to be part of that intelligent, dedicated, committed team. So I think there's something to the journey, not just the destination. Now, there are a lot of people who know me and don't, who when I didn't make it the fourth time and said, oh my God, Diana, you're going to be 95 and you're still going to be trying this swim. But I'll tell you, my team, they never, not any of them wanted to quit. They were in it for, as I said, the adventure, the history, and the deep friendships we made. We will be bonded forever, me and my team.
Yeah, and it's the arena speech, hopefully I don't get too soapboxy, but it's very easy to be the critics, especially nowadays, right? With the internet and chat and all this. So it's easy to be like, point the finger at the person as opposed to being the person that's actually doing the thing, the action. And I think that's very easy to fall back into a critic or a cynicism of like, well, they failed because of this, but it's like, but they're trying, they're doing the thing. They're trying to swim from Cuba, to Miami or Florida.
I mean, that's the way Teddy Roosevelt sort of ends that. He just says, these two, the critic in the armchair and the guy in the ring, I want to be that guy in the ring every time, even if he fails. He's getting up and he's trying over. I want to be that guy. Yeah. And our team felt like that. They wanted to be that guy,
That's awesome. That's so awesome. Now, we're going to touch on team. I got one more question because I'm just very fascinated by the actual act of like swimming in the water. And you touched on this kind of at the beginning, all the different hazards and things that, you talked about weather, you talked about jellyfish, sharks, right? Like just Mother Nature in general, whether it's weather, animals, or even your own physical ability. How did you overcome kind of that, and you touched on again, but the fear of the unknown? Like you don't know what you're going to run into. You don't know if you're going to run into a shark. You don't know if you're going to get stung by a jellyfish.
Well, that's where the team comes in. So can I be out there every minute? You're in a state of sensory deprivation. You've got these fogged over goggles over your eyes. You're turning your head 53 times a minute to breathe toward the boat. And my team, led by Bonnie Stoll, who Jodie Foster plays in the movie. Yep. And so at 53 times a minute, that's almost once a second. Can I really, with fogged over goggles, not even a mask, be looking for sharks below? That's insane. So if I'm worried about sharks, and I'm going to think that every cloud that passes over that casts a shadow, every wave that has a peak, I'm going to think that's a fin. I've got to let go. I've got to have a team. And we had the top shark experts, top shark divers in the tropics. We had them on our team. Nico Gazzelli was our head shark diver, and he came to me, but before the first one he was on, and he grabbed my shoulders and he said, Diana, our team, we will die before you do. We will make sure a shark is more interested in us than they are in you. So they use no fatal gear, no spear guns. We kill no animals on our watch, but they're swimming below me in the pitch black of night because we don't use lights. Lights attract jellyfish, lights attract fish, so sharks. So, if there's a little moonlight, that's one thing. If there's no moonlight, it is black as the ace of spades. And when we swim at night, two divers are under me with these two long triangles of PVC piping with a hard ball nose on the end of it. And they're looking left and right, front and back for the luminescent eyes. And if a rogue shark comes up, mostly they don't want to. They see the hulls of the boats up there. They don't want to come up in the middle of it. We have electricity floating, emanating around me too. They don't want to be there, have their sonar bothered with that.
Yeah.
If a shark's hungry, some of the animals out there haven't eaten in a week, literally. There are no bait fish. There are no reefs. So an animal's hungry and an innocent little swimmer, Jason, comes by making a little low frequency vibration on the surface. They think dying fish, wounded fish, dinner bell, they're around under us all the time. But if one comes up thrashing too close to me, they're my guys. How am I ever going to thank them? I've tried. They take these PVC piping, mechanisms, and they try to punch them in that sensitive amplitude.
Oh, yeah.
And they move them out, get them interested in them instead of me. So I can't be afraid. I can't be afraid. I honestly, I'd rather see one of those oceanic white tips at 12 feet than a tiny little inch square sugar cube shaped box jellyfish, because I almost died, should have died the night I swam into a swarm of those. But I've got to rely on my team for the navigation, for my nutrition, for my soul, that needs lifting, and for the shark protection. I have to let go and just be involved with what I need to do, which is keeping that body moving forward at the best speed I can.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, just surrounding yourself with those people for all those reasons, physical, spiritual, doing it for them doing it for you, probably just drives overall confidence and just your grit to move through and move past it.
Evidently it was about 2 hours from shore. Now picture me, I'm down at the surface level, so I don't see anything. I don't see anything, but everybody on the boat knows that we're just 2 hours from shore. They see the palm trees. We've been trying for 35 years. It was big, but something could still happen. A shark, a jellyfish, anything could still happen in those 2 hours. But I asked Bonnie and our navigator, John Bartlett, because they told me we've got about 2 more hours to go. So they brought the whole flotilla boat and the whole 40-person team, all of them valuable, every single one valuable. And I gave them a little speech. I was treading water. I cried a little bit. And I said, I guess I'm going to stumble up on that beach pretty soon. Finally, I guess somebody's going to take my picture. But don't you ever forget, any of you, that we did this together. Yeah. We made history together. And, I read about your business, the Pure Storage business anyway, a lot of brilliant tech minds, and every day is a different era of technology. Every day is new regulations and whatnot. And nobody, not one of those employees, you guys out there, are doing this by yourself. You can't. You have teams, and you got to respect each other and lift each other up and get past those obstacles together. It's exactly the same as what we did out there. Every individual needs a team.
Yeah, and it's a little cliche and it doesn't fit exactly, but it kind of goes back to the whole, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, you go with the team. Now, granted, little too precise, but I think the point is made as far as like you want success, usually a team is involved. And speaking of that, so teams essential to success, essential to winning, whatever category we want to put it on. But you did touch on their spirit and their ambition over the, these 3 decades of trying to accomplish this, but because you did have some unsuccessful attempts. How did you keep those core individuals of like, come back and do it again? We're going to do it again. I'm going to do it this time. And unfortunately you didn't do it the second time, but you're like, hey, we're going to do it a third time. Like, how do you keep that motivation and them, I don't know if buy-in's the right word, but like, how do you just keep them on Team Diana, like, we're going to do this?
Yeah. I think honestly, all of that emanated from mutual respect. I had sort of, stirred the Kool-Aid. I'm the one who had this vision. Since I was a child, this swim was important to me. The connection between Cuba and Florida, everything about it stirred my soul more than any. Look, it's a lot of water on this planet. It's a lot of blue, and you could go out. You and I could sit down and look at the globe and pick 1,000, maybe 1,000,000 different swims of 100 miles. But this is the one that was in my soul, that meant something to me because of childhood, because of no other swimmer doing it. And when I stirred that Kool-Aid and spoke those words that were so authentic to me, that team of mine, they drank that Kool-Aid. They were in it just like me. I said to our main kayaker, the kayakers carry the electronic shields that put out that electric field in an ellipse under me, and Bucko was the head of our kayak team. And I said after the 4th one, And none of these people on this team ever got paid a cent. They took time off their families and their work because they believed in, they drank the Kool-Aid. That's why they were in it with me. And I said, Bucko, I know you've missed a lot of work. It's tough. I wish I could pay you, but you know, are you willing to go a fifth time? Because I'm going to gear up and train another year. The training is the tough part, frankly. I'm going to train another year. And he said, Diana, I repair air conditioners for a living. Being out on the water with you is the biggest thrill, the biggest adventure I've ever had or I ever will have. I don't care if you try 100 more times, I'm going to be there every time. So, Jason, there was no problem keeping the team motivated. I think it's because my dream was so authentic and I spoke such authentic words, you know, that we just kept drinking that Kool-Aid together.
Yeah, authenticity always shows through, right? Like, you know when somebody believes something, you know when their heart's in it, and that can carry folks, right? That, you know, you call it Kool-Aid, I say it gives them the heart, you know, whichever way you want to phrase it.
Yeah.
You've mentioned multiple, I'll call them, let's say mini teams or different teams within your overall team, I guess. Like you talked about Bucko and the guys with the, you know, the shark bongers. I don't know if the technical term was. Like, how is the collaboration and the teamwork amongst your team, right? So you have to say, here's the goal we're going to try to succeed at. But each of those folks probably has to do their own kind of specialty to their thing, but they still have to kind of come back together as a whole to show the teamwork, like, this is how we're going to do this. Like, is there somebody is that Bonnie who's like kind of orchestrating?
That's Bonnie.
Okay.
Bonnie Stoll, and you know, I do believe, I guess we should do some research on it, but I do believe we're the only two athletes in all of history, including men's sports, where way back in the day when Bonnie was number 3 on the professional racquetball tour, I was her coach. And her fitness coach, her motivator, she's a tremendous athlete, quick and strong. And that's when racquetball was in its heyday in the 80s. And 30 years later, I became the athlete because I had retired and then come out of retirement, and she became my coach. But Bonnie was the head of the expedition. She earned that position. She was out there training swim after training swim, 14 hours one day, 16 hours the next day. You know, it's a grueling sport, no matter how you look at it. A lot of lonely hours, a lot of tough hours on the shoulders. And Bonnie became so aware of all the personalities, and she like with the Kool-Aid analogy, she poured a cup of Kool-Aid for every team member and said, you Jason Tiller, you are valuable. Our shark diver, you're taking your life, you're putting your life on the line. We respect you. You tell us how it should go. You know, when you signal us shark, what we should do, as long as I don't get out or touch the boat, because then the swim's over. So we had the shark team, 6 shark divers. We had the kayak team, 6 kayakers. We had the medical team, 2 doctors, ER doctors from the University of Miami, because there's my health and my getting through this alive. Then there are all the people on the boat.
Sure.
You've got tropical storms that come in with 40 to 50 mile an hour winds with no notice. Within 2 minutes, a tropical storm sweeps across, you know, the Florida Straits. And what if, God forbid, someone on a boat falls and cracks their head open? So we need a medical team. We've got the navigation team. You know, we don't have a map in front of us, but you can just picture if Key West is down here at the bottom of my coat, Havana, Key West is up here at the top of my head. So you're trying as a swimmer to swim due north. But the conundrum is that right here, squeezing through the Yucatan Channel, is the most powerful water current, ocean current on planet Earth, the mighty Gulf Stream. And right here between Cuba and Florida, when it gets over east and goes up the Atlantic seaboard, right here, it's about 85 miles wide, and it is traveling at about 6.6 miles an hour.
Oh, wow.
East, and you're trying to swim due north. So you can figure out the math immediately. It's going to take a genius of a mathematician to guide you across that current. And when you're strong, head you into it a little bit. And when you're not doing too well, head you out of it. And that was John Bartlett. He was our genius navigator. And then we had the boat drivers who have to keep the boat. It's not easy to keep a big 37-foot heavy boat going only 2.2 miles an hour, which is what I'm going, and keep it right next to me, because those shark divers and Bonnie, they all need to be right next to me, not have have the boat, you don't pay attention for a minute and you're too far ahead, you're too far behind. So we were like a well-oiled machine, and we trained all these hours together to get across.
That's so awesome. Yeah, and it's when I had this idea of like when you're talking about the Gulf, like it was like it's almost like you're trying to cross the freeway, right? You got all these speeding cars and you're trying to like get across. And just the the physical strength to do that. It's just amazing. I'm going to switch gears on you just for for the next question, because we talked about your swim and everything, but you probably tackled another very complicated or very challenging goal of you wrote a book, right? And I know people that have written books, and I've heard their challenges with writing, doing that, and it was called Find a Way, and it's talking about your journey and to figure out how to hit goals. Tell me a little bit about like what made you decide to become an author of of all things afterwards.
I didn't decide. I've been an author for a long time. I've written several books.
Okay.
And I've just finished my first book for middle grade readers, my first child's book. So,
oh, nice.
Yeah, so I wouldn't put I wouldn't put writing for me in any kind of a difficult category, but You Certainly Find a Way was, an autobiography, which is always very audacious to think that your life, is interesting or means something. And there's a lot of non-swimming in that book, and I'm proud of that book. I think that it's inspired a lot of people. I've heard from people from all over the world who have a woman wrote me, 38 years old, who was going down to cancer. And she read that book, Find a Way, and she said, I might go down, but I'm looking for a way. My husband and I and our family, we are trying to find a way to beat this thing. And then 3 years later, she beat it. And she had a stage 4 bad. So if anybody,
wow.
Trust me, Jason, if anybody thinks my words, whether it be on stage or in a book or in a movie, inspire them, then, that isn't that what it's all about. I knew that was happening back in my 20s, Manhattan Island, up to in my 60s, Cuba to Florida. People, I've been so lucky, and I'm so proud to say that many people from all around the world, from Chile to China to exotic places like Wyoming, have been writing me to say that they're not swimmers, they're not athletes. It's not about that at all, but they have something important that they want to dig down and find their true grit to either get through it because it's devastating, or to accomplish it because they've put it off for so long and they didn't believe they could ever do it. So that's sort of my lot in life that I take great pride in, that maybe my life and the way I've gone about it so far has been inspiring to people,
Yeah, it's like you said, it's about the journey, and everybody's journey is different, right? So my goal might be different than what your goal is, but it still probably takes the same, we talk about mental strength and teamwork, those things to accomplish whatever that goal is. So even though it's not specifically for me about swimming from Cuba to Florida, I might have other goals where it's like, I can still take that information and apply, like, oh, how you build a team, or how you get that mental toughness when you get knocked down to get back up and, go out and try to accomplish it. So I could see that, how that easily translates across whatever, somebody's goal is.
Yeah. And that translation, that transference of those tenets of living a life that way, it sometimes, it used to surprise me, because there couldn't be anything more eccentric than swimming all these long hours, and what you encounter on the way across. It's extreme to the max. And on the other hand, as I just said, I just heard from an 8-year-old girl in North Carolina, in 3rd grade. She's been bullied. She's a little chubby, and her schoolmates have called her chubby. She has a little bit of a lisp, so she's been bullied about that too. And she has seen my movie and heard me speak somewhere, and she stood up in front of her class. Her mother sent me a video of it and said, you guys have been bullying me for 2 years. I've gone home crying almost every night for 2 years. Well, today I'm sick of it, because today I'm taking on the spirit of Diana Nyad, and I'm not taking it anymore. I'm just as good as all of you. I'm not really chubby. When I get a little taller, I'm going to be just the right weight. So I'm sick of it. And some boy in her class stood up and he said, Jude, we are so ashamed. We will never, ever bully you again. We have our own problems, and you haven't bullied us. So there's an example, Jason, an 8-year-old girl who has nothing to do with swimming, but she just wants to live her life and live it big,
Yeah.
I'm just so honored by stories like that.
Yeah, that's an amazing story, especially at, kids at that age can definitely not be the kindest of people, I think. So, I know we're kind of run out of time, but you mentioned it, and I would be very remiss if I didn't ask at least one question about it. Obviously, the movie Nyad did come out probably, I think, within the last year. I don't remember exactly out on Netflix. What if there was something that you would want that was like the most important thing in the movie that you would want people to take away from it, or something that you felt like didn't get captured about your overall experience? Is there anything that you would want to comment on that or share with
Yeah.
folks?
Yeah, I'd have to say yes, and I put it diplomatically because I'm just beyond honored isn't good enough. I can't find a word to have Annette Bening, one of the great actresses of our time, play me, and the iconic Jodie Foster play Bonnie. The movie is named after me, Nyad. I mean, how often do you get that lucky? So all of it captures the grit. Captures the resilience, captures the not caring what other people think. Just chase your dreams and chase them hard. All of that, the friendship between me and Bonnie, 45 years but one thing it didn't capture, and I wasn't big talking in the press about this because I didn't want to criticize the movie in any way. But even the producers, the directors, and the actors agreed with me that they made their Hollywood decision not to make the team as large as it was or as important as it was to me. And in the end, when the Annette Bening, me, the character, arrives on the beach finally in Key West, they wanted to save that moment for her to say, you know what? I've learned something. I need my team. And they go crazy. Whereas before, she's been dismissive of them, doesn't really know their names. And that wasn't me. I was almost mother to most of those young people on my team. So that hurt my feelings. And it just wasn't the correct history. But listen, I'm lucky that a film was done and that good a film, won a lot of awards. And Jodie were nominated for Oscars. So I'm good with the movie. I'm lucky to have it. But since you asked if there was anything missing, it was a true, realistic, evocation of the team and all they did.
Yeah, there's always a little bit of movie magic on things. And if anybody hasn't seen it, I've watched it several times. Me and my wife, we love it. It was fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
She was super jealous when I told her I got to spend some time with you today. So so folks haven't seen it, go check it out. It's excellent. It's an excellent movie. And of course, like you said, Annette Bening, Jodie Foster, two of my favorite. I'm a big movie person, so two of my favorite actresses as well. Yeah. With that though, Diana, I want to thank you again for your time. You've been most gracious with it and answering my questions and dealing with us over here at Pure Storage. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and your rest of your afternoon. And I guess hopefully we'll speak again sometime. Maybe that's going to be my goal, is to speak with you again sometime.
Well, that's an easy one, Jason, anytime. And let me say to all you guys out of Pure Storage, again, I wish I could meet you in person. And you just go chase your dreams as hard and as big as you can.
Awesome. Thank you, Diana. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you to Jason Walker for his insights today, and a very special thanks to our guest speaker, Diana Nyad, for her story and her insights. That was definitely a great 30-minute conversation. And also, I want to thank all of you for spending time with us today, and hope you enjoyed it as much as we have. And we look forward to seeing you in the next Engage event series. And I want to say thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.